And oh yeah, there's the recording. So yeah, to kind of cover what these two tracks are going over before you decide, the intro track is going to have these 4 segments. So the first one is going to be basically teaching you how to craft a script and how to execute them. And then we're going to be going over a bunch of different example scripts and prompts to kind of help you, brainstorm through some of these challenges. And hopefully by the end of the day, you'll be a little bit more comfortable in writing scripts in Bash and Python. So yeah, we're going to be covering quite a bit, but don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to ask questions and work on it yourself. It's not going to be just like following along and you're going to get left behind. Don't worry about that. For the experience track, we're going to be having Clemence go over how to build a service for Linux machines. This is basically going to work as a maintenance script or service for a LAMP stack. If you don't have a VM, don't worry. You're just writing, the script, so it would work if you had one. And yeah, that's going to be a little bit more advanced. You're going to be learning more stuff about like how to create Python classes and like methods and functions like that. So if you already have a little bit of programming experience or are comfortable in Bash and Python already, that's going to be the one for you. So from here, I'm going to be opening the breakout rooms. This main room is going to be for the intro track. So if you're going to be in that track, don't worry about it. But if you're going to be in the more experienced track, then you'll be joining that one. So I'll create the room now. And hopefully you guys can see that. Let's see. Will events track be recorded in case we want to progress? Yes, Clemence should have permission to record, right?
I'm a co-host. I don't know if we can record in a breakout room though.
One way to find out.
Yeah, if it ends up that we can't record, then we'll have.
I have OBS. I can use that just in case.
Yeah, that sounds great. Then we'll have a recording. So
somehow,
don't worry about it if you want to move up. All right. So can you guys, Clemence, can you join the breakout room?
When I click that, it just tells me that I have to create them now.
Okay.
Never mind.
How about now?
I see them.
I see it.
I see only one though.
Yeah, so the breakout room is going to be for the experience track, and the main room is going to be for the intro track.
Oh, gotcha.
Got it. We'll be there.
Yeah. So for those of you who want to be a little bit extra challenged, then head over there. And then the rest of y'all will start in just a couple of minutes once everybody's been able to transfer over. I think just about everyone who's trying to transfer over should be in the breakout room. So let's start. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is familiarization with how you make a script, basically. And it comes down to 3 simple steps, and this can apply to pretty much any script. First one is you got to make sure that your script has the executable permission. So for Linux, it's going to be quite literally just the X attribute, and we'll go over how to like make sure that you have all this stuff. So don't worry if you don't know what a shebang is and stuff like that. And yeah, the executable permission basically just allows you to run that script. Otherwise, it would just be treated as a text file. The second thing is to make sure that you have a shebang in that text file. And what that is basically telling the computer is that it tells it, okay, this is a bash script, or this is a Python script. And it's going to just tell the computer what language it's in, basically, how to interpret that text file. And the last thing that you have to do is just run your script. Pretty easy. So we'll go over how to do that with this first, I guess, lab, you could call it, called Easy Backups. So what we're going to do is look at this challenge prompt first. So it's going to make a script, or I should say we're going to make a script that backs up some particular files to a directory, and we're going to be doing it in both Bash and Python to kind of show you how to do the same thing but in two different languages. And here's some pseudocode here. So we're going to first create a list of files to backup, and then let's just use these files as an example. And then, by the way, these ones are for if you have a Linux VM. If you don't, you could just throw in any text files. It's all really the same concept. So if you are working just in an IDE, for example, you could just throw in some text files in that location and use it as a backup. And then for the destination that we're going to be saving these files, we're going to put it in, let's say, our home directory /backups. And I will share my screen for my VM. So can you guys see my VM?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is how to set up the script, right? So I'm going to be using Vim just to edit some text. You could use an IDE, you could use Nano, you can use gedit, doesn't really matter. Just as long as you have a way of writing down text into a file. And I'm going to be calling this easybackups.sh. I'm going to be starting with bash, by the way. And just like that, I'm going to create a new text file. Voila. So if I save this file and use ls, I'll have easybackups.shell here, right? And with easybackups.shell, you can see it's a white text. However, if I want it to be executable, I need to make it green, like this shell script is. If I use the command ls tac-l, and I'll actually zoom in here so you guys can see this better. And I look at easybackups.sh, right? It says rw right? For Linux permissions, what this means is that we can read and write to this file. This is the owner of the file, or I should say these 3 bits are the owner of the file. These 3 bits are for the group that the file belongs to, the group owner. And this is for everyone that's not the owner and not in the group that owns the file. So as you can see here, since we are a user and it's owned by user, then we can read and write the file, but we can't execute it yet. What this dash here represents is that we are missing the execute permission. And since we are missing the execute permission, we can't run this. So how we change that is we use chmod +x and then the name of that script. So in this case, easybackups.sh. Now, if this were to be in a directory where we don't have administrative privileges, or this file doesn't belong to us, for example, then we would need to include sudo. So in this case, I will be using sudo. And then it's going to ask me for my password. And then after I do that, when I run ls-l, hey, it's now green. And I have the executable permission for everyone. Everyone can execute it. Now, this is the simplest way of creating an executable file. If you care more about security, then you might only make it for the owner, for example. But for all intents and purposes right now, when we're learning, whichever is easiest is what we're going to go with. So yeah, if everyone's following along so far, then how you create a shebang is you just add this hashtag or pound symbol, or number sign, whatever you want to call it, and then the exclamation point. Now, normally, when you have a hashtag or pound symbol or whatever you want to call it in a shell file, it's going to be interpreted as a comment. What a comment is basically a line in the file that the computer doesn't read, doesn't look at it. It's meant just for humans to read. And the interesting thing is there is a specific reserved keyword inside of the Linux interpreter or the Bash interpreter that says, okay, if I see the hashtag symbol, it's a comment. But if I see the hashtag symbol followed by the exclamation point at the top of a file, that's a shebang. It actually has a specific case for that combination. So that's why it's a little bit different than what you might expect before. And then after this, we specify what kind of file or what kind of interpreter we should be using for this. In this case, since it will be a shell script, I'll use /bin/bash. So on your guys's IDE or VM or whatever you're using, you should have this shebang at the very top. And the reason why it's called a shebang is because it's like hash, and then the old term for an exclamation point is a bang. So it's like hash bang. That's why it's called a shebang. But yeah, now that we have the shebang at the top of the file, we can actually write some code. And just as an example, I'll use the command echo. If you don't know what echo does, it is a bash command that basically just prints. It's similar to print function in Python or system dot whatever dot out in Java. If you don't use other programming languages, then it's just going to spit text on the screen. It's as simple as that. So I'll say hello world. And then when I save this file, I can run or execute this file with // and then the name of the file. In this case, I named my script easybackups.sh. So I can run it like this. And the specific reason why I need to have the / in front of my file name is because if I were to run it like this, then it's the Linux interpreter, that is my terminal, is going to think, oh, he's trying to run a command called easybackups.sh, but I can't find that here. And if I run it, it says command not found, right? And that's because it doesn't know that I'm trying to execute the file. So when I have this /, what this is saying is it's defining a file path. And this dot is saying this current directory where I'm presently am running this command. And it should be a file named easybackups.sh. And I have that. So now it knows, oh, he's trying to access that file, and that file is executable. So I'll run it. So when I run it, it says hello world, just like that. And if anyone is a little bit confused or a little bit behind, feel free to either unmute yourself and speak up or leave a message in the chat. I'll answer any questions you guys have. But yeah, so that's the basics of how to create and execute a bash script. Now, if you were to be doing something in Python, then I'll show you guys how to do that. In this case, I'm going to be creating a .py file, and I'll call it easybackups.py. So I just want to point out that my bash script was a .sh file, and then my Python script is going to be a .py file. Now, technically speaking, on Linux, you don't need these extensions, but for just being able to quickly identify what kind of file it is, as well as for other operating systems, you should include your file extensions like this for when you're creating scripts. And I'm going to create another shebang, except this time I'm going to be using the Python interpreter, not Bash. So instead, I'm going to be typing in /bin/python3 because I want to be using the Python 3 code base instead of Python 2.7, which is the older version. So yeah, this is basically saying to the computer, okay, this is a Python 3 file. So I should be reading Python 3 code. And to print out essentially the same thing that I did in the previous script, I'll just type out hello world. Right? And this is the print function. It works exactly the same as the echo did in the other script. So this is just going to spit this out onto my screen. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to run it. And in order to run Python scripts, you're going to do it a little bit differently. For Python scripts, you need to use the Python 3 command to run Python scripts. You can't just run it as an executable because you basically need to tell Python, hey, I want you to run the contents of this file. So then I'm going to do easybackups.py. And then when I do that, it's going to say hello world. Now you might notice for when I created this Python script, I didn't have to use chmod to make it an executable file. And if you were wondering why, that's because Python 3 is going to be essentially the executable part of this interaction. I'm running Python 3, and Python 3 is just going to be reading the contents of this file. That's why I didn't have to make the file itself executable. Now, to go more into this actual challenge prompt that I have for you, let's go over some of the stuff that, oh, that was weird. Let's go over some of the stuff that we went over on Tuesday. So I'm going to be opening up my shell script again. So if you could open up your shell script as well. The first thing we're going to do is create a list in Bash. So I'm going to delete this line for now. And if you guys remember how to create a list, then just like drop it in the chat or unmute yourself and kind of like speak it out. But basically what a list is it's a series of items that are stored together. Very similar to an array. In Python, I think lists and arrays are actually like the same thing, but we're going to be creating a list with these files. So for example, let's name our file list files, right? And we're going to put equals and then our parentheses. In Bash, you're going to remember that variables cannot have spaces when you're assigning them. So you see how like I didn't have a space in between my variable name and the equals, and I didn't have a space between the equals and the parentheses. That's pretty important. If you do have it there, then Bash is going to get confused. It's like, okay, why is there a space there? Is that part of the name? Is that part of the value? It's just a weird thing with Bash that just they don't really want to fix because that's just the way that it works. And then we're going to have the contents of our list. And let's have the first one here. Let's see SSH SSD config. And then lists in Bash are not comma separated. They are space separated. So you'll see here how my first item is here. And then I have a space in between my second item here. So then I'm going to start typing in the rest of my list. And like I said, if you are working on an IDE and you don't have a VM, then you can create just any text files here and just use those file names if you'd like. This is just as an example. And my last one here is a T group. Right. So here's my list. This is what it looks like if I give it some more space. but yeah. There, I have my list, and I'm going to try to iterate over this list, and that way I'll be able to, copy them and move them to the directory that they need to be. So in order to iterate over something or do something for a certain number of times, you're going to want to use a for loop. And you can basically just associate if there is ever a specific number of times you want to, loop over something, that's what a for loop is for. Even if you don't know what that number is at the beginning, if you know, okay, there is a certain number somewhere, I just need to figure out what that value is and then tell the loop that, then you're going to use a for loop. So in this case, I'm going to be iterating over the number of files. So I know that, there is a certain number. So I'm going to say for file in, and let's say our list of files is files. So I'm going to be calling a variable, right? I'm going to read information from a variable. So in order to do that in Bash, you have the $ and then curly brackets. That's going to tell Bash, okay, this thing is going to be a variable. And then I'm going to say files, which is the name of it. And here's the important part. I want to have these square brackets and this @ in the middle. And that's telling Bash, okay, I want to pull the individual items from the list, and I'm going to be going over them. That's what these square brackets and the @ in the middle mean. If I were to put a number inside instead of the @, then it's going to say, okay, I want to pull that specific item that's at that location. So another important thing to know about lists, just in general for programming languages, is that they start at 0 and not 1. So in this case, /etc/ssh/sshd config is stored in location 0, not location 1. So what I can do is finish the rest of this loop. So it's going to have a semicolon there and then do. And then I'm just going to print out all the files for now. And this is just an example. So what this is going to do is print out the variable file, which we defined here as file. So basically, what the structure is saying is, for every item in this list, we're going to pull that item out and we're going to call it file, right? And that's why we have a variable here called file. So I'm going to save this and run it. And when I do that, it's going to print out all the things in my list. Hopefully that makes sense, because it's basically saying, okay, I'm going to start here, print it using echo. Then I'm going to go to the next one, and then I'm going to echo it, and then the next one, then echo it, and the next one, and then echo it, right? And we can use this same general concept to, create a backup. Instead of just echoing the name out, what we can do is use the copy command, and then say we're going to copy this file, and we're going to move it to, or store it in, our home directory /backups. Right? So it's just copy and then the file and then our destination. And now, if I were to use a quick ls on that location, you'll see that I already have some stuff here. But if I delete those things, now it's empty, right? And I run this script. Voila. They've been stored inside of my backups directory. Now, if you didn't create this directory, you'll notice something different. You'll probably just have a file in that location, your home directory, called backup. That's just because the directory wasn't created yet. And here you can kind of see some of the problems when your script is really, really bare bones like this. When you are creating a script, you're going to have a number of assumptions, right? For example, in this script, we assumed that this directory already exists. And when you're writing a script, you have to realize that the computer doesn't know what it's doing. It's just going to do what it tells you, right? When you have, when you're doing these tasks manually, you're going to like look for all these different things. Like, oh, I'm going to check if there's a backups directory, stuff like that. The script doesn't know how to do that. You have to make sure that it's there. So for example, I could have done like make directory. Whoops. I could have done like here, and I could have said like make directory backups like this, right? And that way it would make sure that it's going to be there. And that's just kind of a habit that you're going to build while you practice scripting, is kind of like making sure that all of your assumptions are covered, that you have, not just some random functionality that's doing stuff that isn't actually what's going to be related to your system. But yeah, so that was the first challenge that we have for you. We kind of helped you walk through it. Hopefully everyone's been able to follow along so far. The next one we're going to be going over will be a couple common sysadmin tasks that you can kind of speed run and automate using bash scripts. But before I do that, I'm going to actually just quickly cover how to do the same thing in Python. So yeah, in order to do that here, we're going to create a new list called files, and I'm going to be hard coding it like this. So it'd be like /etc/ssh/sssd config, and then a comma separated list. So, we call it, let's see, group, let's see, Apache 2, Apache 2.conf, and the last one, which was password. So like that, and then the for loop would be very similar. I could say for file in files. Then I can actually import a library first. So I'll just do from sh util import copy. And then I can do copy file. And then here I can put backups like that. And that should just run fine. So I do Python 3 backups. Oh, is it just sh util? Oh. Oh, I might need to do that. No, apparently not. It works here. But if I run that one, yeah, okay, it works there. Copy file. Oh, that was why, because I used that. Yeah, okay. So if I specify the path here, I should fix that basically. / user. Yeah, and then yeah, there we go. So the thing that I forgot is I had to hard code the full file path instead of using the tilde. But yeah. So that's how you do that. I'm going to pass it over to Luis to cover his sysadmin tasks that we're going to be quickly going over. And you'll have an opportunity to write some of your own code. And yeah.
Very cool. Thank you, Gabe. That's a lot of really good information. I know for sure. That's new stuff to me, actually. Mostly like everyone else here, I'm fairly new also to the scripting game, but that's why we're all here together, right? So it's gonna be a fun little time. Um, so from here, I would like to kind of just introduce again a little bit of what we were talking about back on Tuesday. So a lot of what was going on, a big part of the conversation that we were talking about was the scope in terms of like when should we use what. So I'll primarily be focusing on some sysadmin work that's like, you know, fairly simple things that kind of get your feet wet to introducing a lot of these different topics that are honestly going to be really good for you guys in terms of being able to automate a lot of these different tasks. Because something, let's just take it like hypothetically, right? You're a sysadmin, you're barely coming into this environment. You're probably just going to have access to only probably just Bash. You may not have a lot of access to like Python and stuff. So I'm mainly going to be focusing on how to write some really quick, some quick and dirty scripts to be able to get you guys on your way and introduce topics that can translate over to Python, as we have like more of an interaction and you guys start expanding on your language skills. So I like to call Bash a little bit of a duct tape language. I know it's not exactly a language, but of course it's more of like a command line interpreter, but it is very up to like your personal taste and your kind of like own unique take on how you start building these programs. So for the first one, I kind of titled these a little different. We're going to go through about 3 different scripts, a little bit of a challenge. I'll give you guys some 5 minutes to kind of work around, see where it is that you guys are at, and then we can go from there. I'll walk you guys through the process of how I ended up coming with my solutions. Some of you guys, you might be a little bit more advanced. You might know how to like kind of juggle things around. So definitely feel free. If these parameters don't work for you and you want to find something different and it still works, that's the cool part. So feel free. If you guys have your own like methodology on how you want to take it out, that's awesome because that's the cool part. Like I said, duct tape way to work around things with Bash. So the first thing is emergency shutdown.sh. This is an introductory script that I think is really important because as a sysadmin, you're probably going to be working with services. You're going to be working with configuring different things. And one of them is primarily probably going to be the firewall. So from a defensive standpoint and in general, you're probably going to want to get your toes wet with this kind of stuff, right? So the first program I'll call it is emergency shutdown.sh. So imagining you're in an environment, right? You're just kind of coming in, stuff is going all over the place, or you just get tasked by your boss like, hey, can you configure these different things? Some stuff is going down. We kind of want to have these services shut down right now, you know, what have you. So pretty much what the main task of this script is to create basically a script that just modifies a firewall. So you'll have manual inputs for different settings for each one, the ports and stuff. And pretty much we're building off of what Gabe just kind of went over in terms of like how to set up some stuff. So right here, what we'll have right there at the top, you guys can just open your own SH file. You can press Nano or Vim, whichever it is that you guys kind of work with the most. And I think I'll get that set up for you just in case you guys can't see. Do you mind if I share screen real quick, Gabe? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, because just in case you missed it, I also, like I said, different methodologies and how we go things. I actually execute my bash scripts by typing in manually bash and then the script. But just to get you guys set up real quick, let's just go. I use Nano, so I'm total weenie about it. I'm sorry, but that's how we kind of go, baby steps, right? So I'm gonna call it Nano and emergency shutdown. Ooh, not that one, not that word. See, shutdown. Sorry, also bad spelling. .sh. And let's click on that. And pretty much just kind of reiterating what Gabe ended up doing for his. Of course, we want the shebang right up at the top. And what we're going to do is pretty much just, obviously, it's going to be in bin bash. We want to make sure that it's red. And so from here, that's kind of how I'll set you guys up for right now. I will leave this over to user list. Oh, okay. So yeah, that's just so you guys can kind of navigate back over. That's where I'll leave you for right now. I'll bring up the settings real quick. If you guys can see my screen. And let's go take it from right here. So yeah, what we're gonna want to do is pretty much, I'll start it off with sudo UFW, and then we're gonna be setting the default settings and firewall settings to deny any incoming connections. And we want to deny access specifically to port 22, port 80, port 21. And once you guys feel you're ready and confident and you want to like execute this, type in bash emergency shutdown. And just in case, I want to make sure I got all that right. Another thing too, sorry, I actually forgot to mention this, but let me just kind of bug out of here real quick. But before you guys do get started, some of you may not actually have firewall enabled. So please type in UFW and then press enable. You can also press status to check if it is already enabled. Some of you might have it if you guys have been pro hackers so far and stuff, but hit that first. And then it should be, it should activate for you. And then from there, you guys can take it. Yeah, so I'll leave this up. I'll give you guys a quick 5 minutes. And then after that, we'll go over and we'll do a quick little walkthrough. Of course, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. And then we'll just take it from there. So I'll have my Vim thing open over here. I'll put some lines of code to kind of help you guys along for each passing minute, just so, you know, in case you guys need a little bit of a hint and stuff. But yeah, so I'll take it from there. Put a little alarm on, sorry. Yeah, of course, as Gabe said, and of course, any kind of questions that you guys have, please, 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 just holler. Even if you guys didn't even make it up to this part, please just let us know. I want to make sure that I get you guys set up on how to, you know, get this stuff going. So let me go back over to our presentation slides. Not that one. Let's not look at that one. Back up here. $15 seconds until I start throwing hints. Also, I thought it was going to be way nicer in my room after last night's meeting, and it is 400 times hotter. Not a good sign.
Yeah, put some Jeopardy music on.
Oh, you know what? I should have totally done that. That would have been great. All right, cool. So writing about the first line or so. And remember, if you guys are kind of stuck on like how commands go, I would highly recommend looking at the man page. This is I'm not going to say super straightforward, but there's a lot of commands there that kind of explain how this kind of goes down. That's our first line. For our next one. Once you guys finish, if you feel free to leave that over in the chat as well. I'd love to hear if you guys are finishing these fast enough or not. If not, I definitely, please, like I said, let me know. Want to get you guys set up with the maneuvering around with this stuff. That's for our second line. Of course, as I'm sure, the next ones might be a little easier. If you guys execute them, you'll probably see some return values. If you get an error code, then of course, that's how you kind of know maybe some things need tweaking. I think one of the hardest things that I've been finding out a lot about like kind of getting into scripting has been just syntax a lot. Syntax really matters. The small things will go a long way in terms of like how things get executed. But yeah, remember, you're just kind of playing around with things. It is command line interpreter. Cool.
Can you go back to the slides real quick?
Sure.
Please?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
No worries.
Oh, it's only ports. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You trying to show off, Robinson?
No, I didn't screenshot it, so I didn't know what to do.
No worries. My bad. My
okay.
bad. I'll start leaving them on there. You know, that's probably a better idea. Thank you, Robinson.
Yeah.
All right, so our little time is up. But yeah, so I kind of just worded this so it kind of allows, you know, you kind of see where it is that the lines are kind of moving on and stuff. But yeah, so now that we have that, I'll walk you guys through kind of like how the process goes in terms of like setting this up. So pretty much if you read the man page or if you kind of looked at the .help, that should kind of give you an indicator on like the specifics as to what commands and we're using and why. So really all this is a very general exercise to kind of see we're putting in, of course, manual like commands and stuff for each one of these lines. But at the end of the time, you know, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is actually execute them all at once. So that's the cool part, is that we'll have them in a file to be executed super fast. So whenever we come back here, we can always just like reference this back and then just execute it. And like I said, this is for emergency purposes. Our life is to make this as a sysadmin is almost to make our lives as lazy as possible in quotations, utilizing bash and stuff. So a lot of these manual processes, we don't want to just like, you know, make fast, make quick, and, you know, get pen to paper very quickly, so to speak. So after that, we'll have sudo, oh, my bad, UFW deny 21. And then that should be good to go on our end, right? And then to close it out, Control X, press Y, and then we're going to save it as that command. And then after this, I like to use bash. You can also use /script. I'm a total weenie about it. I'm sorry. I'm just using these, being very lazy in my home directory. I highly recommend too, if you haven't taken a snapshot yet, also recommend to take one. This kind of might funk up with some settings, but I'm hopefully you guys got a fresh cut over here, but I think you guys will be fun. You guys can, I also recommend going back over. You can reverse these as well, so that's another big thing. But yeah, so we're gonna go over to bash. We're gonna type in the name of the file that we got, which is emergency shutdown. And then .sh, I think I capitalized O and H. And then we'll should have a return. And there we go. We added these values accordingly. And so it basically just, it's a confirmation that all of these guys are pretty much denied any kind of connections. We are, let's go to UFW actually, -- help to kind of see a little bit more of an in-depth look, right? So these are the types of commands that you guys are going to be playing around with. Like I said, when you're messing around with bash, it's a command line interpreter. So really, I think the main thing to kind of understand a little bit is to know that you're really just moving around with these keywords and these key functions. You're not exactly like writing something from the bottom up. A lot of these processes have been like, are integrated already into bash. So really you're just kind of moving pieces around as opposed to making the pieces yourselves, right? So we defaulted over there with the default settings, which is right back over here. And then we're denying, we added a deny rule, which is why we're denying the port access to those ports. And at the end of the day, that's kind of pretty much the fair amount of like, you know, automating processes and stuff. But if you guys wanted to reverse this, all you're pretty much just going back over is to the default section, just pressing that default, and then after that, just hitting enable. So, I mean, you can go back over and remanual and just play around with it. That's something I highly recommend doing. These commands that we're giving you and these small little scripts are really important to kind of, I'm hoping that you guys keep them for later to expand on. So as you guys kind of play around and see other different things in the future, you guys can, you know, reference these back over. So like I said, something that you might be like in Hivestorm or another competition like that, it's important to kind of understand how these processes work, and scripts are a major factor in kind of like putting those things together. So from here, the next one that I'll be showing you guys is add user and automating it. The main reason I want to show this to you guys is because as a sysadmin, there's no environment if, there's no users, right? So as you guys are just kind of like getting your feet into, you're probably the only users you have are probably going to be just root and whichever one you defaulted in when you created it. So I just wanted to introduce this to you guys so you can have your own, test field to be playing around with these different things, right? Since we're automating a lot of these different processes, it's important as a sysadmin to be enforcing these policies on somebody. Because you can always like change user and then go into that and see if your policies even worked, right? So that's another way to kind of like go about this and stuff. So our next script that we're going to be going ahead and playing around with is called auto user add for .sh. The main reason is because this is just adding for what you're going to be adding is 4 different users through the code. So our little pseudo code here we're playing around with just as a basic walkthrough. So you're going to be listing these, the variable. I wanted to start you guys off so you kind of have an idea where to go from here. And so pretty much for each one of these users in the list, you should print their name and add them in using the sudo user and command. If you don't know what that is, I'll show you guys real quick. The other reason I wanted to, oh, wrong one. You got so many tabs, man. But yes, so the main reason I wanted to show you this as well is because the main thing that we want to like get rid of is having to do this 4 different times, right? So sudo add user, whatever, let's say user 1, right? You don't want to have to automate all this stuff that takes forever. That's a long time to kind of get through. So the main reason I'm trying to get you guys into this one is so you can create your own environment by just shoving these 4 usernames in there. It's not going to be anything special. You can play around with their settings afterwards, but you can have a test environment to just get your starting point right off the ground and stuff. So I'll go back over to the slides. And of course, if you guys have any questions, please just let me know. I'll throw on another 5 minutes. If you guys have anything, please, right here. It's okay. I'll be writing it out as we get closer. And then I'll explain a little bit on the methodologies and kind of like how things work from there. Whoever gets first place and cracks this quick, you get a hug from me later. It'll be a big one, I promise. Oops, sorry for on the screen too. Blocking some hints. This is kind of just fairly building of what talking about in terms of, oh man, sorry. Yeah. In terms of, like making sure that you understand like the differences between brackets, listing, and all that stuff. Alrighty, I'll start going ahead and getting that first line in. Seeing where we can go from here. See that guy back there. Oops. Yeah, I wrote this down on pieces of paper too, so I don't know if anyone else does that for their coding, but I am like super old-fashioned that way. I have to have like this logic thing going on where I gotta like see exactly where that's going with more notes. It's super granddaddy way of doing this. So here we're just making that list for that first line, and we're setting up a variable. You guys can actually name this whatever you want, or even the names too. That's pretty much just totally up to you. That's where the manual start is, or stuff is really coming in. And after this, if you didn't know, we'll be using a for loop. As of course, we want to iterate only the 4 times, right? Oops. Setting another variable here, user. A $sign. That bracketing right here because we want to actually incorporate that @ so it gets everything and grabs all the users from that list that we set up earlier. That's our little time limit. So congrats if you're able to get that fairly quick. Yeah, let's just keep going from here, right? So now that we have those bracketing brackets in here, we're pretty much just going to be moving over to the next line. So semicolon, that's kind of an indicator for anything that came before. Pretty much that's like telling Bash, hey, this is where we're going to stop. After that, we're going to do because so it just logic processing, right? It's going to be for all this stuff, please do this. So we'll have that. We'll tab on over. And then from here, we are going to be echoing the results that come back over. So we're trying to capture them, right? We're using the keyword adding. And then we're going to reference again back over to what we had in the for loop, which is user. So we're going to have to use that $sign one more time. $user. Then after that, we're going to use, we have to use sudo permissions, of course, because we're, you can't just add, not every user can just add other users. So from there, we use that original command, which is user add. And then we're going to add that variable that we referenced earlier. So all that output that we got from that echo, we're adding it back over into this function. And so from here, we got that. So it's a small little simple script, nothing super crazy, but from here, we'll just save that. And oh, sorry, my bad. We're actually going to go back in here real quick. Shoot, nano. Don't forget, once you guys finish this, the for loop will keep going forever. So you might even get return error code. So don't forget, once you guys finish with that, always put done for once you have like a for loop. And then after that, we're gonna just exit out real quick, make it back over. And then let's actually go ahead and execute it, right? So if you guys haven't known the little shortcuts yet, you can always do Control A, and then that'll send you back to the beginning. So from here, just to save a little time, right? Press bash, and then we'll do add user 4, and then hit enter. And so user 1 already exists. I was testing this out a little earlier. But so yeah, it actually added users 2, 3, and 4. For you, it should be all 4. And just to kind of verify to see that they are there, what you can do is, because the way that, of course, Linux works, without going into that whole shebang in terms of like where things are placed, these users will actually appear in their in the etc password file. So if we cat that, we'll actually see all the users and the different users that are on this Linux system. So we can do that real quick just to verify that they did get added, right? So we can cat the etc file just to see and read what the contents in there. So etc pass wd, and then there they are. So you guys can actually reference these for whatever it is that you want to go ahead and like play around with and stuff. So that you can modify this and expand it to have whatever 10, 100, and kind of play around with as many users as you kind of want, and just see how it is that policies can kind of work in that sense, right? So I just kind of wanted to give you this to have that environment to play around with, because there's a lot of stuff you can do with moving around. And just how you saw earlier, this is really great exposure for you guys to be able to kind of understand how you can add things into like a command, right? So how we added users from all that entire list over into that. That's good. So you guys can get your feet wet in terms of like being able to add different functions or parse, values and stuff into command and, into actual commands over in Linux and Bash. So from here, I just got one last simple one. It's kind of more of a defensive methodology. I kind of wanted to just add something a little easy, but nothing super crazy. This next one is just called verify.sh. And so for this is just like a very, 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 very simple way to verify if a user exists on this system or not. This is more intents and purposes, like say you, from an attacker standpoint, say you got into a system, but you don't have like a lot of different functions that you can use. You can also use, I believe, the ID function, which will kind of give you the same result and actually return the specific value and tell you if it exists or not. But sometimes you might not have access to these different tools, right, when you're on there. And at the same time too, say you're on the other side, sysadmin, and you see some weird, strange activity going on, it's probably in your best interest to check whether or not they even exist on your table, right? So sometimes you'll see some things when people connect over to your system, but this one is a fairly basic tool. This one's going to be a conditional, so hint on that. But what we're doing really is creating a script that's going to check if this user exists, right? So this is a little bit of the pseudocode that we got. So bin bash, of course, is we're going to start. So if the user has a value of 1 when passed over through the dev and null file, I wanted to kind of like give you guys that off the bat in case you don't know what it is. And then from there, print the user that's pretty much print the user found, or print if that user is found, and if not, print the user is not found, and then end that statement with done, and then just kind of how we iterated with the last one, and then execute it with bash verify.sh. So make sure, remember, it's a conditional, so it's an if statement. Be aware of like how if statements kind of work. There's a little caveat to there, but yeah, I'll give you guys another few minutes to kind of go over that, and then let me know. Like I said, any questions, please feel free to shoot them on over. I'll start writing it out as we kind of get into about the 2-minute mark. It's a so much highlighting.
And if you guys stick around to the very end, I have I'll call it a little special extra thing for you,
Yeah.
just in case.
Anything and everything from you, Gabe, is so special. I'd stick around.
Free Raspberry Pi?
Free Raspberry. Oh, what?
No,
Ah,
unfortunately.
got him, dude.
Robinson, you have too many.
I want more.
Hey, Robinson, at this point, you should just be giving them back to Swift.
Whoa, yo. How many do you
Bro.
have, Robinson?
I've been exposed. I don't
You
have
like
any.
4, right?
I've been working with them. I don't have any.
Oh, okay.
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 Whatever, man. All right, cool. I'll get started on writing this. And go back over. Start with our bin bash. Then after that, we're gonna, of course, it's a conditional. So it's gonna be an if statement. You can make this variable however you want. It's the same kind of way that we did the for loop back over there. So it's something that you will reference back over in the rest of the line. So if I'm putting ID, you can put kind of like almost whatever. It's a, like I said, it's a variable, so it's up to you. And from there, gonna do this because remember, it's returning back a value. So if it's anything, if we're the value that we're trying to get returned back over is pretty much like 1 or anything on that end, I'll show you right now. We're going to use this and sign and this dash because we want that one value to kind of come back over and pass through that file that we mentioned earlier. So my bad. Here's the answer. There we go. And we're going to pass that through the dev/null. We're going to end that. And then, of course, we're going to echo because we want to know whether or not, or we want the pretty much to print whether or not this user was found or not. So we will do user found. Then after that, it's going to be an else, because pretty much if it's either going to be, all right, he finds it or he doesn't. So that's like the parameter that we're setting. So do echo again. And this is pretty much like, all right, if it doesn't return that value, then pretty much he ain't real. Oh, not found. And then remember, time's up, but we want to close this down, right? So FI, very important. If you close this out, it would actually just return back an error code. Sometimes nothing, very strangely, it'll do one or the other. But from here, this should be good enough for what we got to go for. Then exit out over here, verify SH, and then we'll go ahead and shoot on over, right? So let's do boop, Control A, so we can start back over there. Hit bash, and then, oh yes, my bad. So we're actually passing in a specific parameter. So let me go back over to that nano thing, right? So what we have over here is actually an ID. So we're actually setting in that name. This $sign, I believe with the 1. And please correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone here, in case my thought process is not working as intended, but I believe where that 1 is, we're actually going to be writing a parameter in. So we get to set that ourselves. Yes. So that ID is just pretty much like, hey, this is what the ID is, but that $sign with the 1 is actually the specific parameter that we're setting ourselves. So I'll show you that in a second. So because this running by itself, it's always going to return user not found, because technically we're not setting anything for it. So let me get back out of this real quick and just show you. So I'll run this again, and of course it'll say user not found, right? So, but if we do the same thing and we put in root, because I mean, almost pretty much any system is going to have root, it's going to be a value of 0 technically, but it returns a value. So it's coming back over as user found. So it exists, it's on this system. We do the same thing for, let's say, those other users that we had. So user 1, it'll say user found. And then if we do that again, but let's just say, let's call school real quick. Doesn't exist. So that's another, like, small little thing to play with. But yeah, I hope that these scripts, these small little like things to kind of get your feet wet in terms of like getting bash and how to like put pen to paper, quick and dirty stuff. It kind of helps you, and you can expand on these as you move along. Highly recommend saving these, because like I said, you never know when you're going to have to reference things back over. And sometimes, things happen. Linux explodes and you probably can't find these commands anymore. But another good thing to do is, of course, feel free. The internet always exists, but there's sometimes they might be functions that are so out of scope that you might not know how to like start finding or start playing around with. So highly recommend doing small little things like this. It helps a lot. I just spent, I think the equivalent of about like 2-3 hours on these small little things, but they do take a long time. And the cool part about that is that they kind of like reinforce that learning. So whenever you have to be in this situation, because you're not going to have what I have over here, right? Like you'll never just have this stuff like on you. Like you're going to be in a competition or you're going to be like at your job. You can't just call these whenever you want. So it's a good reinforcement factor to kind of play around with this stuff and be able to generally memorize at least the important bits, so that you can play around with things, these things moving forward. So from here, I'll end and stop screen sharing and hand this back over to Gabe. So thank you guys for listening to my little stuff. Hopefully it helps and helps you guys moving forward with some little cybersecurity stuff, things to play around with scripting. Thank you, Wang.
So yeah, the next thing we're going to be going over is the web scraper, and we're actually going to be having our friends over at .script to be covering a pretty neat little project that they made. So yeah, without further ado, do you guys want to screen share or should I?
You can screen share for now, and then we'll let you know when.
All right. In that case, whoever's going first.
All right, so what is a web scraper? So we have to understand what a web scraper is before we deploy it. So here's an example. If you have a job listing board and you want to look for a certain job, and the website doesn't update the jobs frequently, you can search for a specific job. Like, let's say you want to be an engineer, you don't care about being, a doctor or something else. Web scraping basically acts as a filter for you to find what you're looking for on a web page using HTML code. So you can extract data and information from websites using a web scraper. Next slide, please.
Okay, so web scraping, we've all probably done it. If we copy and paste, we're taking some data from a website in HTML and then pasting it somewhere else. So web scraping actually has two different parts to it. One part of web scraping is a crawler, which looks around for websites and links that you can use to scrape. And then the scraper's job is to extract the HTML data from said URLs. So today we'll be making our own web scraper using a Python library called Beautiful Soup. Beautiful Soup is a pretty easy, beginner-friendly web scraping library for Python. And since it's a library, it gives us access to functions we never had beforehand. So we're going to use those Beautiful Soup functions to make a web scraper. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah.
So for our challenge, we will be creating a web scraper for the fake Python job website and have it output specific jobs that the user wants to filter. So for example, an engineer. For our web scraper, we used Replit, which is an in-browser IDE. And if you guys have another IDE that you prefer to use, then feel free to use that. And we're using Replit specifically because it's great for collaboration. And it also has this pretty neat feature where you don't have to install any of the packages or libraries you use manually. So Replit will do that for you as long as it's imported in your program. And for those of you who are using your own IDE, make sure to have Python installed. And these are the installation commands for the libraries we'll be using. And some quick hints, use the developer tools so that you can find the HTML elements. And when you do this, notice that the HTML has unique and descriptive names, and they have things like tags and IDs and classes. And think of how you can use these to help you filter out the jobs. Next slide, please. And this is a rough outline of what we'll be doing when we're making our web scraper. So first we'll be importing our libraries. Alongside Beautiful Soup, we're using the request library, and this allows us to actually grab that website URL and use it, and thus these two libraries will work hand in hand. Next, we'll have what website we want to use. In this case, we'll be using a fake job website that was developed specifically for practicing how to web scrape. And with this, we can then start scraping. And in order to extract the data, we will need to request for our website's HTML code. And HTML is the markup language for web browsers and has a ton of useful elements that we'll need to use. And after that, we have our HTML extracted. We can then filter the specific data and information that we want. Next slide, please.
So if you're confused, or this, that we made some pseudocode, which gives you the general gist of what we have to do step by step. So these are the hints you guys might need. I also put the links you would want to use into the Zoom chat, one for the actual website with the fake job listings and one for Replit if you just want a quick and easy online IDE. So we'll give you guys like 10-15 minutes to work on it. If you guys have any questions or help, let us know. Yeah, let's get it going.
And yeah, let's see if I can get some music going.
Rocking the old school stuff. That's what I'm talking about, Gabe.
Yes, sir.
You have to hear it in your heart, Robson. It was actually Gabe just putting music for himself.
So Gabe's internet crashed. So could we have someone else screen share?
I can screen share.
That's what I.
Okay, while we're getting that figured out, if you guys are confused, these are the two steps we did to get this working. So of course, obviously, first we imported the libraries, which we previously said were the request and beautiful soup libraries. And then we set a variable to the website, right? So we set that variable. And then we have to parse. We have to scrape the HTML data using beautiful soup. So how we did that, let me pull it up. Okay, so how we parsed, meaning we scraped the data from the URL, is that we first set a variable called URL to the website. And then after that, we did web page, which is a variable is equal to, and we use a request library. So request.get, so we get the URL. And after that, we parse it, which we set another variable, parse is equal to beautiful with the parameters of content. So we're in the web page variable that we had requested. And then we also do with an HTML parser. And we print the parse.text.
Is anyone confused on that? I can walk through it step by step if need be.
I'm confused.
Okay. All right.
No, it's okay. I'm trying here. I'm struggling. I'm floating on water.
I'm gonna share my other screen. All right, can you see that screen that shows the Replit?
Yeah.
Okay. So on Replit, if you're not familiar with using Replit, to create a basically your programming environment, it has the create thing here, and then we're using Python. So to call this the web scraper, and then create the and as that loads up. So let's say our first step we'll be retrieving the HTML content. So basically, this is the fake Python website that you see. Can you see that?
Mhm.
Okay. What we're doing is we want, like our challenge said, we want to just get the job and like a specific job that the user asks for, right? So to do that, we would look at the HTML content for that, and that's on Windows. It's Control Shift C. I don't know what it is on Mac, but you have that, and we're looking specifically at each of these jobs because we want all of the information from the jobs themselves and none of the like I guess everything else. So so if you notice here we have the card content, and that holds all of the information, so the job, the company, and then the area that it's in. So if you look at the code, the HTML code itself, it's within the card content div class. So it shows that. And then specifically, we're looking for the content that tells us where the job, what the job is and what the location is and all that. So that's within content. Yeah, so if you notice, there's a bunch of different descriptive names for each of the titles. So this one, for example, is highlighted here, and that's where we see the actual job title. And then for this, it shows the company. And for this, it shows the location. So what we're trying to do is get that information from each of these jobs. So the first thing that we want to test is to see if we can actually get the HTML content itself. And to do that, again, we import the libraries. So we have the request library, and then we have the beautiful soup. So to do that, we have a package called VS4. We import beautiful soup. And basically VS4 is a package that holds the beautiful soup library, and the beautiful soup library itself holds the code and the functions that we will use in our web scraper tool. And then like Shivam mentioned, the first thing we did was we got the URL for the fake job website. So we initialized a variable called URL and then pasted our fake job website in there. And then the next thing we did was we wanted to initialize a variable to make a request to get that URL, and we use that. We use the method from the requests library, and what we did was just web page equals requests dot get URL, and that basically stores this URL, stores all of the information that we have from that URL into this variable named web page. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so the next thing we did was actually parsing the HTML content, so getting the web page content from here, basically getting all of this HTML code. So to do that, we made a variable called parse. It's equal to the beautiful soup. And then within the library, there's a function with the parameters where we can get the web page and then the content from that web page. And there's a library within beautiful soup called HTML parser. And like as the name says, it just parses the HTML for us. So this line right here is just getting the HTML content from the web page, and we're using the HTML library parser library. So after that, we have everything stored in the parse variable, all our content from the HTML page stored in that variable. So to see to see if we did it correctly, we would just print out the parse. And we see this. You click run, you'll notice that it's installing the packages like we mentioned earlier, since Replit does that automatically for you. It installs. Okay, so if you notice, that's all basically all of this printed out into our console. But you'll also notice that we have a bunch of the HTML tags. So like we have the div tags, the footer tags. If we wanted to just get the text itself, so if we just wanted to get like the location itself, we would do parse.text. And what text does, it basically just removes all of the tags, and we'll see. Oh, and that's what we see. Okay, so that's the first step of just retrieving the HTML content. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. And then our next step would just be to filter by the ID of the content that holds each of the jobs. So like we mentioned earlier, these have unique descriptive names, and they're pretty much the same for each job, which makes it easier for us because we can just call that specific class or that specific ID and get that information from there. So here we have the card content. So that's card content. Did you want us to copy all the HTML or specific? Right. Okay. What we have right here is it copies all of that HTML. But what we want to do is we want to copy the specific line. So that's where we're headed right now. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. So this step, we're filtering by the ID of the content to condense the data. So instead of pulling from all of this HTML, we're just pulling from specifically the card content. So to do that in our initial thing, so we have that. I'm gonna comment this out for now, since this was just to see if our code worked. And then what we would add here is a result thing to find our, hold on. Okay, so the results container is the ID above everything. So it holds all of the card content. So what we want to do is just specify that we want to look at just the information in the results container. And that's what this code right here is going to do. So results is equal to parse.find ID equals results container. Okay. Yeah, so that's just getting specific information from our div ID called results container, and that's all of the blue that you see there. Does that make sense to everyone so far? The next thing we want to do is again check to see if this works. So we would do results, and then I'm going to clear. Run that. Then if you notice, this just takes, it still looks pretty long, but this just takes the results container content. Okay. And then there's also within Beautiful Soup itself, it has a method called prettify. And what that does is you notice how it's all just like everything is left aligned, and normally it has like it's tabbed. What prettify does is it tabs it for us. So if we have a prettify command, yeah, it does that. Okay. Is everyone good so far? All right. The next thing we want to do is condense our HTML to show specific information in the classes. So let's say we earlier we mentioned where is it? The card content, and that's the class that we're looking at. So what we would do is we would specify, or we would initialize a variable, and we'll call it job elements, like we showed in our pseudocode. So job elements is equal to, we're gonna take our results. So the data that is stored in results, we're gonna take from that. So results dot find all, and what this does is we want to find everything that has the name, the class name card content. Yeah, so find if it will find all the elements that are in a div and part of the class card content. And that's exactly what we're looking for since we want to look inside here. So we have that. I'm gonna comment up this again, since that was just to see if our code worked. So next, we can get started on asking the user to input a job that they want to look for. So we'll say job I want is equal to the input with the job you're looking for. And then we're gonna, at the very end, we're gonna use the case fold method. And this is just so that it ignores the case when we're comparing the job that the user wants to the job that is on the website. Okay, is everyone good so far? Okay. All right, now we're gonna create a for loop to iterate through all of the jobs that are basically on the website. So to do that, the for jobs in job elements, that's here. So everything in the card content, we're iterating through all the jobs in the card content here. And then what we want to do is we want to find the specific tags that specify what job it is, what company it is, and what location that company and that job is in. And to do this, you would have to look a little bit closer at the HTML code itself. So if you notice here, we have a class called title, and that is what tells us what the job title is. And that's the same throughout all of the other job titles on here. And then we also have what's called location, which tells us the location, and then the company is somewhere here. Okay, the company should be here somewhere, but just to not waste the time. Okay, what we do here is let's initialize a variable called job title. And we want to find all of the jobs that, everything that is a job. So to do that, we would use our jobs and then find. And then it was within the H2. H2 specifies that it's a header. Yeah, so it's in the H2. So we do that, and then the class was called title. And then similar to how earlier we used where is it? Parse.text to show just the text and not the HTML. We're gonna do the same thing here. So what this would do is it would just spit out the job title. So for example, senior Python developer. And then we do the same thing with all of the other two parameters. So we have the company, similar thing, but the company was in H3, the third header, and then the class was called company. And then we do the same for location. And that was a paragraph, so it's P. And then the class was called location. So that is our, this basically, what this for loop does is it iterates through each of the job listings on here, and it takes out just parts of it. So the parts that we took out were the job, the location, and the company. And the next thing we want to do is to check if we're doing the job title. So to check if the job title within the website or within our thing matches the job title that the user wants. So to do that, we would do if an if statement. So if the job I want is in the job title, then we want to do our condition. Okay, and then also another thing to note is we want, since we're comparing the strings, sometimes strings are uppercase, sometimes strings are lowercase. So just to make sure we don't run into any issues, we do the dot lower method, and that basically lowers the case. And then the next thing we do is if what we do here is this is saying if the job that the user wants is in any of the job titles within the job elements, then we want to print out that job as well as the company and as well as the location. So that would just be a couple print statements. So job title. Oh, I'm just going to copy job title and then the job company and then the location. So that's actually all that we would need to do to filter out the jobs. And let's see if it works. Okay. Input the job that we're looking for, and in our example, we use engineer. And what that does is it filters out all the engineering jobs, and it tells us what company it is and where it is located. All right. Is anyone stuck on anything? Do you want me to go back to anything, or are we all good? Okay. And then if you also want to do like for example the company, you would just change this thing. This thing would be company, because again we're gonna compare that. And let's say the company has ink in it. It would take all of the companies that have ink in it and print that out for you. But yeah, that's pretty much it for our web scraping workshop thing. And let us know if you have any questions. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you. And as promised, I will be showing you guys one additional thing that we have for our scripting workshop. So can you guys see my screen here? Great. So you guys can see Google, right? And you'll notice there is no folders inside of here. And there's this really cool feature in Google known as Google Colab, where you basically can run Python scripts as well as some other stuff, basically just on Google hardware. And one of the features that this has is basically you can use this to create scripts specifically for Google Drive, which is what this is an example of. And obviously, this is a little bit more advanced because it uses some more niche libraries. As you can see here, there's like PyDrive and Google Colab, OAuth to client, stuff like that. But basically, what this does is it's going to create or call this authentication thing. And these together are basically going to ask you to authenticate, like, okay, are you who you say you are? Do you have, permission to use this Google account for stuff? And it's going to give you a token. Once you get that token, you paste it in, and then, it'll work. And then this part here, so yeah, just to reiterate, this part right here is just authenticating. It is required every time you run it for the first time in a particular session, but it should remember it for the rest of that one session. So I already did this, so it's going to remember that also because I don't want to give you guys my credential token. That would be kind of bad. But this part here is the actual script. So I create a Google Drive object using my authenticated session, my Google authenticated session here. And then I'm going to create a new Drive file. So I have a variable called file1 equals new, and then I'm referring to this Google Drive object, and it's going to call the method create file. And then I specify what the parent folder will be, and this is the ID. And by the way, if you didn't know, Google Drive folder ID is just right here. So if you look at the URL, it's just the part after folders. So that's where I got it from. That's where I got that. And then I set the title to, let's say, test folder. And then this MIME type here is very, very important. It's basically telling Google Drive what kind of file we're making. In this case, it's going to be a Google Drive folder. So that's why it has this particular name in here. And then we're going to call upload, which is basically saying, okay, I want to actually push that to the Google Drive. And then this part is just basically printing out, that I've done that. And this part right here is actually 2 steps, but yeah. So this first part, this inner command, is going to be creating a new file. However, this one is going to be a regular text file, which is what happens by default. And as you can see, that's why I did not need to have a MIME type here. And the parent is just the new folder that I created. So this is the one that I'm creating things in, and then I created a new folder. And then this line right here is basically saying, get the ID of that new folder. And then using it inside here for the file, the parent of the file. And then I'm going to, upload all the files. So if I had multiple, then it would upload all of them. And then I have some, simple messages just to tell me where it is in the script. And if I run it, it tells me, I created a new file, which is really folder, but yeah, this is the new folder ID. And my test.txt was uploaded. And if I go back here, voila, you can see I have test folder here in Google Drive, and I have a test.txt right here. So you can use this to do some scripting with Google Drive. And I just kind of wanted to show you guys that scripting is not just a Linux thing. It's not just like a programmer's kind of thing. Like you can use, scripting everywhere for a whole bunch of things. Personally, I use a modified version of this script to set up my Google Drive every time there's a new semester. But yeah, like you can use this for a whole bunch of stuff. I do have to mention that Google Colab, I wouldn't say necessarily is required to run some of these things, but it makes it a lot easier because it's on Google hardware already. You don't have to like set up environment variables and stuff like that. So if you're planning on running, for example, this script from your local computer or from a VM or something like that, you might need a little bit more than what I have here. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys some more options. And with that, we're going to be concluding today's workshop. If you guys have any, last minute questions or anything you guys want to say, feel free to just let us know. But other than that, we're glad you guys stopped by, and Taylor can stop the recording now.